Welcome to Startup Success, the podcast for startup founders and investors. Here you'll find stories of success from others in the trenches as they work to scale some of the fastest growing startups in the world. Stories that will help you in your own journey. Startup Success starts now.
Marlena, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So I think it would be helpful. You have a great background. If you wouldn't mind walking us through your experience, and then if you can share how it led to the founding of the company Advice.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's founding origin story can be long if you allow it to be.
Yes.
I went to Lehigh University for my undergrad. I thought I was pre-law. I ended up finding myself in a marketing consulting role at MasterCard.
Oh,
And so I started my career in corporate. And then right after corporate, I jumped into the world of startups. At that time, not to age myself too terribly, but like startups were just like not part of like everyday vernacular, at least now on the East Coast. And so, to my immigrant parents, I think that they were like shocked and horrified that I was leaving like a really nice corporate job to take a leap into the unknown. However, I just loved the space so much and I really loved building in it. And I've been marketing in some capacity in this space ever since. I actually went back and I got an engineering degree so that I could better connect the dots between product and eng to market-facing language and market-facing audiences. So I'm fully invested in the space. And so after having a career in various leadership roles at various startups, mostly pretty technical, highly regulated industries, from insurtech to health tech, I met my partner at my last job. We worked together really well to bring that brand and that product to life. And so we spun out the company Advice. And we have been in business now for a few years, and we consult lots of startups on their go-to-market, their brand, their narrative, product strategy. So we work with a lot of different types of founders and verticals, and just really love what we do. We love getting in on the ground level and making a real difference and applying a playbook that is very efficient for founders to, start getting market signal so that they can start making really smart choices about their business.
it's so great because I interact with a lot of founders and they know a lot about their product, their particular market, but not so much about marketing and some of the other things. And so when they can leverage fractional help in this way, I think it's terrific.
Yeah.
And then I'm super impressed that you got an engineering degree because lots of times there's a disconnect between marketing and engineering that
Right.
happens a lot in startup culture. So you must be able to really help with that.
I think you really need that connective tissue and someone who can translate engineering speak into market speak. And that's definitely my secret sauce. It's definitely my superpower. Ever since I was little, my dad is a PhD engineer. And I was looking over his slide decks and his presentations and proposals and making sure that they, weren't too in the weeds. And so I think I've just always had that kind of ability to be that translation layer. So I'm really happy to be able to do that, as a living.
For sure. That is a superpower. How beneficial for your clients. That's great. So let's kind of get into it by starting with go to market. It's really changed,
Yeah.
right? It's fundamentally shifted. If you wouldn't mind kind of walking us through how it's shifted and where it kind of stands today.
Yeah, definitely. And like just to take a step back in terms of like how I think about or talk about go to market. Go to market is an operational strategy. It's not just a thing that happens on like the marketing and sales side. It's truly like an entire operational strategy that the company as a whole, all hands on deck, need to be involved to launch a product to reach your target customers and ultimately to win sales. And so I think that in a conventional go-to-market, there's like a handoff that happens between departments with competing KPIs, competing systems and just like their own different operational way of doing things. And just like it has like a very linear path traditionally. You build an MVP, you blast it out with a big PR launch, you spend a lot of money on cold outbound, whether that's through advertising, through your sales reps, through whatever systems that you are leveraging. You write SEO bait content because you know that content is important, so you start putting stuff on the website. You may or may not hit your target ARR that kind of, shows in your mind PMF. And you keep growing by hiring more sales reps to capitalize on like this motion. And then you have to keep generating more marketing leads to feed this hungry army of sales reps, and then ultimately you have to raise more money so you can continue doing all of this stuff, and that's kind of like the ultimate external signal that you're doing well. And I think that a lot of that has been changing. Right now we're in an environment where capital is much more constrained than it used to be. There's so much tooling out there, and there's so much more operational rigor that's expected out of companies earlier in their life cycle. So things that used to pass to be a Series A company are no longer passing. You have to start demonstrating a certain level of sophistication, operational sophistication earlier on. And so the new go-to-market is really, it's 5 things at a high level that I can walk you through really quickly. One, start narrow, not loud. And by that I mean you want to build a minimum remarkable product, not necessarily a minimum viable product. Now with all of this like tooling that's out there, there's vibe coding, a lot of tooling has commoditized building things, and what you need to build needs to be truly remarkable, and then be prepared to iterate on that. And in terms of storytelling, instead of like a big splashy PR, push, you really want to lead with the product and produce effective storytelling that is attracting the right audience, not everyone, but the right people. And the way you know that you're doing a good job with this is that the right people are saying yes and the wrong people are saying no quickly. So you're not clogging the funnel and clogging your own internal teams with conversations that are never going to go anywhere.
Okay.
I think also PMF is now proven more so with strong retention and word of mouth as opposed to just reach. And you can grow a really strong operations and expediting function in your startup, in your company, that's able to quickly test and grow potential channels, as opposed to having a big laborious movement in one direction toward one target. Really figure out who the right customers are, like who are like the real champions who love your product, and find out what it is that they love about you and how to find more of that similar to the audience, which sounds obvious, but it isn't always obvious when founders are in the mindset that their solution can be so many things to so many people. By practicing this discipline of thinking a little bit more narrowly, I think that you'll find more success in the current market.
I don't think that's obvious, because otherwise your funnel gets filled with people that are never going to convert, right? So
They're never going to convert.
Right.
There's always going to be feature requests. Your
Right.
roadmap is never going to be able to actually move forward because you're always going to be bogged down by one-off requests, by
Right.
one-off customer types that you're never going to be able to replicate. And that's a huge time and resource suck for
Exactly.
stage companies.
And a lot of first-time founders just think, oh, the more the better, without
Yes.
thinking about that.
Correct.
component.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Kate. The fourth thing is aligning the teams around shared metrics. I really almost always see a lot of misalignment on shared KPIs across the company. I think it's really important where it pertains to go to market that you de-silo the company as much as possible, and make sure that there's a unified front that's completely laser focused on the target customer. And then the last piece is you can stay capital efficient in a lot of ways through automation, through AI. There's really no excuses in this current day and age. I think it's really important that instead of thinking about how to raise the next round, to figure out, in fact, how to maintain capital optionality. This is how you're going to control your destiny. And and ultimately, I think, hot take, the less board members you have in the room, like the better off you will be,
Right.
mental health wise. So, so I think that by maintaining capital optionality, and not being so reliant, obviously, on capital raises, I think that you will be better off. Your company will be better off, and what you're building will be better off.
Yes, and you'll get to preserve some more equity too, selfishly. So I like something that you said a few times about go to market, and that's the shared KPIs, and that it's a company-wide operational strategy, because the startups that I've been a part of that have failed, that was the problem. You know, marketing and sales had KPIs, and engineering and product had different ones.
Right.
And the two conflicted and couldn't keep up with each other.
Correct.
And that was the demise both times.
Yeah. And, you know, as someone sitting in the marketing seat, I actually have like a funny schematic that I share on slides when I do like a webinar on this topic, where you see, you know, like I said, like this cyclical process between the different departments in like this linear fashion, but it's really like a cycle. It comes down from the top. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. I'm getting over a cold.
I don't know why I'm so...
No, when you talk a lot after getting over being sickness, your mouth you get dry, and then you start coughing. So take
Yeah, and I just had like a huge thing of green tea too.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Okay, so we were talking about shared alignment across the KPIs. So I actually have a fun schematic that I show in a webinar format of this conversation, where you could show in like the typical cycle of go to market, where the C-suite is directing engineers to build something, then it gets handed off to product tells marketing about it, marketing, you know, creates the campaigns around it, they basically arm sales with the necessary materials, sales hands off to customer success comes back with feedback to the C-suite, and then like the whole cycle kind of rinses and repeats. But really, the department that's on the receiving end of the most amount of battery and feedback is really marketing, because we're hearing it from the C-suite, we're hearing it from product, we're hearing it from sales, we're hearing it from customer success. So like all the arrows always end up pointing down at the marketing department. And the KPIs for the marketing department are also not always aligned with everyone else. So then sometimes the marketing department acts a little bit selfishly in some ways. So you just don't want that. Like, why do you have all these... The point of having a company is not to have competition between your teams, right? That's silly.
Right, and so siloed. That's extremely helpful to point out. I want to go back to something, you know, you said earlier that we talked a little bit about, and we can delve into it more. And that's the importance of like narrowing down to a really clear category. Can we expand on that?
Yeah. It's funny to me how often I'll ask a founding team, you know, like what market category do you think you're operating in? And then they ask me, what's a market category? So, you know, category leadership, you know, what it unlocks when it's done correctly is you know, categories really shape how buyers think and compare and decide between service and offerings and products. And if you don't define the category, the market will do it for you. And because most buying decisions are made before someone ever even visits your website, frankly, you don't want this definition to precede you. You want to be able to tell your own story on your own grounds. And when you are leading in the category and you understand your category really well, you now have leverage. You can set the rules for a competition. You can shift conversations to not be so focused on what features you offer, but rather the outcomes that your customers can benefit from. And you spend a lot less time explaining and more time closing the deal. So your marketing efforts around all of this and your go-to-market function is able to compound on this on this momentum, as opposed to like resetting every quarter because you're kind of like reinventing yourself or reinventing where you are, or you're not really understanding or realizing how the market is shifting around you. Being a category king is very attractive to some companies, and that's what they strive for. A category king is really powerful in that it provides a completely new way for customers to live, think, do their business. And you also end up owning like often more than 76% of the market valuation, with other companies like really kind of like competing for like the scraps remaining in this space. And like some examples like that are really obvious are like Amazon, Apple, Google, Netflix. Like these are all category leaders. Salesforce, Zoom. It's really difficult now to come out with like a competitor to Slack or to Netflix. Like that's the king right now, right? And now we have like some new kings that are emerging, OpenAI, we've got Figma, we have Notion, Loom. So it's a really interesting space, and they've all built new categories that we haven't really thought about, 5-10 years ago. So I think it's really a really exciting place to be and an exciting framework to think about. But if you want to be the leader in your category, you have to market how you are creating value.
I think that's so important. It really struck me when you said if you don't like define it and you're clear on it, the market will for you.
Yeah.
And I think even more so now with AI and ChatGPT, because founders tell me that ChatGPT will convey what their brand, what their category is, right? So based on what they're putting on their website. So you've got to be really clear on it right now.
Totally. Yeah. So I actually run exercises sometimes because founders do get stuck here, because oftentimes, here's the thing, like founders have really big ambitions and really big compelling visions, but your product isn't always going to it's not going to always match the rate at which your vision is for where you want your company to go and your product to go. And so the short-term narrative is where things get really fuzzy. And when you have a product that is doing well and you have customers, this is creating a lot of like true stories. Like you're hearing all of this buzz and how people are using it and stuff, but you don't know which one to focus on as your primary narrative. And your marketing team doesn't know. Like they're all kind of trying out different things based off all the things that you're hearing from your users. You need to like pick a dominant narrative, because when you have all these inconsistent narratives, it confuses not only buyers but AI models that are training on whatever is out there. So these AI models now are misclassifying you because they don't know what you're saying, because what you're putting out there is all over the place. So you have a lot of things working against you now in this new era.
Wow. So you have to be really clear on what you want to be. And then how do you develop the clear messaging around that? Because
and so, I think working with somebody who's in the space, cough, cough me, but like, anyone who's like really, who's really good at taking an objective stance at this and coming with a playbook and asking you questions that maybe sometimes you don't want to ask yourself or your team doesn't want to ask of themselves. But, like there are some like really easy exercises that you can do even without me, where you can sit down and write one sentence that helps you define this category. So like, we help a specific audience solve a specific problem without an existing pain or workaround. Like, what is that thing?
Okay.
And you can just sit down and do that exercise. Another founder action is writing a homepage headline that intentionally excludes someone. So if a prospect reads it and says, that's not for me, that's actually a win.
Interesting. That's a good idea.
Another thing that I do, that I end up, facilitating is doing a workshop with the team, with the key stakeholders on the team, and we talk for 30 minutes. What problem do we actually solve in one sentence? And I would say 9.9 out of 10 times the answers are widely varying. And if your own key stakeholders are all saying different things, your market is also hearing different things. So again, that trickles down to everything, your buyers, AI, ChatGPT, etc.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just getting like firm alignment is really at the core of finding that narrative.
And so, in these category kings that you mentioned, great examples of how they have that, right? Like their messaging is so clear.
Yeah, I mean, one of the examples I love to give is Apple. If you think about like an iPhone
Hmm.
and you think about the camera, and if Apple just told us like what the features were, you have a Retina display, you have a bionic chip, you
Yeah.
have 48 megapixels. Like, okay. But what they don't, you never see that in Apple marketing. What you see
No.
is you get to capture your most important memories in stunning detail. You have a
Hmm.
display that brings everything you love to life. That is a wildly different way of talking about a Retina display, right?
Yes.
Or Slack. Like Slack's features are they have channels, they have integrations, you can share files, but they don't. That's not what they lead with. What they lead
No.
with is you can stay connected with your team no matter where they are, or you can reduce email clutter, increase productivity. Like it's such a different mind shift
Yes.
from, oh, but we built channels. Okay, but that's not like what's market differentiating. That's not what made them the king. What made them the king was being able to really connect the value of what they built with the buyer.
I think those are great examples because I think the founders listening can really see with those examples the difference between the two and where you want to be in your messaging.
Right, right. And it's really hard when you're in the weeds and when
Yes.
you know how much blood, sweat, and tears went into
Hmm.
building that feature and you just want to, tell everyone about it. If you
Hmm.
don't know how to turn that Retina display into look at all of these beautiful moments that you love so much come to life on your phone, if you can't translate that, then you need help and you need someone who can step in and help you bring that to life.
Absolutely, because a lot of founders have that engineering background and they're so excited about the technology and the development. Let's use your example of the Retina,
Hmm.
feature. They want to lead with, they want to lead with that. I've seen
Yes.
this so many times because they personally are excited about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So is that, on the company advice, you have a friction finder tool?
Yeah.
I, so is that, walk us through that because I think that might be a good resource too for people listening.
Yeah, there's a friction finder. It's really simple. You, as a founder, can go in and basically key in on different areas of your marketing, promotion, your website, and your product. And we ask some pretty simple questions that, depending on your responses, just spits out a score and tells you like where these points of friction are, where buyers might be getting stuck, and you can kind of key in pretty quickly on whether maybe your marketing website is saying all the greatest things,
Mhm.
but the onboarding flow in your product isn't very clear. Like people
Mhm.
don't understand where to click first when they open your application. There can be a lot of these little friction points, and they build up. And when they build up, you have a leaky funnel, and you're losing revenue. And so the friction finder is just like a simple little tool designed to help you kind of key in on that, and then you can use that to, set the next leadership meeting with your team to talk about it and to zero in on it, or helps you decide whether you need like a consultant or someone to help you, take some of that off your plate and figure out how to optimize those areas.
What a helpful resource. So, for founders listening, it's the Friction Finder. It's at the company advice, your website.
Yeah.
What's that URL? Just so we, sorry,
Why?
we'll cut that cough.
Oh my God. I was trying to hold it back. Yes, Kate. So the URL, it's pretty simple. It's thecompanyadvice.com.
Perfect.
And you'll be able to zero in on that friction finder right in our navigation.
Love it. And so, Marlena, we always wrap up this show. One of our most popular questions we ask our guests Any last words of advice for the founders listening that you can share?
Um, I think I, I I I think knowing that you have invested so much into this baby, the people you've hired around you to help bring that baby, raise that baby with you,
Mhm.
because it takes a village.
Yes.
I think it's important to allow their areas of expertise to really shine.
Mm.
I think it's really easy to step into the chief everything officer role. But if you really want to scale and if you really want to be able to step away from founder led sales and you really want this thing to take off, sometimes like loosening the reins and hearing out your individual team expertise can come to your benefit. Hopefully you've made the right hires so that they, that is coming to your benefit. But trust yourself and trust your team. And I think that a lot of founders would be happier if they knew that there's some steps that need to be taken, operational steps, fundamental, foundational steps need to be taken before the full vision comes to life. And
Mhm.
that is okay and that is necessary, because without that, you don't want to have a house of cards that collapses at that pivotal moment when you're actually seeing something exciting happen. You want to have the groundwork laid out. You want to have good systems in place to withstand that flood that everybody wants to create, right? That flood of users and revenue. So be patient.
Right. Excellent advice. And you're so right. When we have VCs on here, when they talk about the successful startups they invested in, it's always about the team, right? And the founders that, built a great team and then leaned
Hmm.
into that team.
Hmm.
So thank you so much. I encourage everyone listening to go check out the company advice website and that friction finder tool. You did a great job of explaining something more complicated than people think. And like to your point, not a lot of founders know even what a category is.
Yeah.
You did a great job of kind of explaining it all and then helping us see the bigger framework of a successful go-to-market strategy and really highlighted some things like about company-wide KPIs and things that I don't think is out there very much. This was a really great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I love nerding out on this. It's a passion of mine, so I love talking about it. So I invite any questions or conversations for the conversations on the topic.
Great. I can tell you know your stuff. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.